by taking a congeries in the lump."
Footnote.
F.H. Bradley, Appearance and Reality, 2nd edition. So Mr. Bradley, in the sole interest of "understanding," as he conceives that function, turns his back on finite experience forever. Truth must lie in the opposite direction, the direction of the absolute. And this kind of rationalism and naturalism, or, as I will now call it, pragmatism, walk thenceforward upon opposite paths. For the one, those intellectual products are most true which, turning their face towards the absolute, come nearest to symbolizing its ways of uniting the many and the one. For the other, those are most true which most successfully dip back into the finite stream of feeling and grow most easily confluent with some particular wave or wavelet. Such confluence not only proves the intellectual operation to have been true, as an addition may prove that a subtraction is already rightly performed, but it constitutes, according to pragmatism, all that we mean by calling it true. Only in so far as they lead us, successfully or unsuccessfully, back into sensible experience again, are our abstracts and universals true or false at all. 3. In section 6 of the last essay, I adopted in a general way the common sense belief that one and the same world is cognized by our different minds, but I left undiscussed the dialectical arguments which maintain that this is logically absurd. The usual reason given for it being absurd is that it assumes one object, to wit the world, to stand in two relations at once, to my mind namely, and again to yours, whereas a term taken in a second relation cannot logically be the same term which it was at first. I have heard this reason urged so often in discussing with absolutists, and it would destroy my radical empiricism so utterly, if it were valid, that I am bound to give it an attentive ear and seriously to search its strengths. For instance, let the matter in dispute be term M, asserted to be on the one hand related to L and on the other to N, and let the two cases of relation be symbolized by L-M and M-N respectively. When now I assume that the experience may immediately come and be given the shape L-M-N with no trace of doubling or internal fission in the M, I am told that this is all a popular delusion, that L-M-N logically mean two different experiences, L-M and M-N namely, and that although the absolute may, and indeed must from its superior point of view, read its own kind of unity into M's two additions, yet as elements in finite experience the two M's lie irretrievably asunder, and the world between them is broken and unbridged. In arguing this dialectic thesis, one must avoid slipping from the logical into the physical point of view. It would be easy, in taking a concrete example, to fix one's ideas by, to choose one in which the letter M should stand for a collective noun of some sort, which noun, being related to L by one of its parts and to N by another, would inwardly be two things when it stood outwardly in both relations. Thus one might say, David Hume, who weighed so many stone by his body, influences posterity by his doctrine. The body and the doctrine are two things, between which our finite minds can discover no real sameness, though the same name covers both of them. And then one might continue, only an absolute is capable of uniting such a non-identity. We must, I say, avoid this sort of example, for the dialectic insight, if true at all, must apply to terms and relations universally. It must be true of abstract units as well as of nouns collective, and if we prove it by concrete examples, we must take the simplest, so as to avoid irrelevant material suggestions. Taken thus in all its generality, the absolutist contention seems to use as its major premise Hume's notion, that all our distinct perceptions are distinct existences, and that the mind never perceives any real connection among distinct existences. Footnote: Hume, Treatise of Human Nature, Appendix. End footnote. Undoubtedly, since we use two phrases in talking about M's relation to L and about M's relation to N, we must be having, or must have had, two distinct perceptions, and the rest would then seem to follow duly. But the starting point of the reasoning here seems to be the fact of the two phrases, and this suggests that the argument may be merely verbal. Can it be that the whole dialectic consists in attributing to the experience talked about a constitution similar to that of the language in which we describe it? Must we assert the objective doubleness of the M merely because we have to name it twice over when we name its two relations? Candidly, I can think of no other reason than this for the dialectic conclusion. For if we think not of our words, but of any simple concrete matter which they may be held to signify, the experience itself belies the paradox asserted. We use indeed two separate concepts in analyzing our object, but we know them all the while to be but substitutional, and that the M in L-M and the M in M-N mean, that is, are capable of leading to and terminating in, one self-same piece, M, of sensible experience. The persistent identity of certain units, or emphases, or points, or objects, or members, call them what you will, of the experience continuum is just one of those conjunctive features of it, on which I am obliged to insist so emphatically. For sameness are parts of experience's indefeasible structure. When I hear a bell stroke and, as life flows on after its image dies away, I still hark back to it as that same bell stroke. When I see a thing M with L to the left of it and N to the right of it, I see it as one M. And if you tell me I've had to take it twice, I reply that if I took it 1,000 times, I should still see it as a unit. Footnote. I may perhaps refer here to my Principles of Psychology, Volume 1. It really seems weird to have to argue, as I am forced now to do, for the notion that, quote, it is one sheet of paper, with it and two surfaces and all that ties between, which is both under my pen and on the table while I write. The claim that it is two sheets seems so brazen, yet I sometimes suspect the absolutist of sincerity. End footnote. Its unity is aboriginal, just as the multiplicity of my successive takings is aboriginal. It comes unbroken as that M, as a singular which I encounter. They come broken as those takings, as my plurality of operations. The unity and the separateness are strictly coordinate. I do not easily fathom why my opponents should find the separateness so much more easily understandable that they must needs infect the whole of finite experience with it, and relegate the unity, now taken as a bare postulate and no longer as a thing positively perceivable, to the region of the absolute's mysteries. I do not easily fathom this, I'd say, for the said opponents are above mere verbal quibbling. Yet all that I can catch in their talk is the substitution of what is true of certain words for what is true of what they signify. They stay with the words, not returning to the stream of life whence all meaning of them came, and which is always ready to reabsorb them. For aught this argument proves, then, we may continue to believe that one thing can be known by many knowers. But the denial of one thing in many relations is but one application of a still profounder dialectic difficulty. Man can't be good, said the sophists, for man is man, and good is good. And Hegel and Herbart in their day, more recently A. Speer, and most recently and elaborately of all Mr. Bradley, informs us that a term can logically only be a punctiform unit, and that not one of the conjunctive relation between things, which experience seems to yield, is rationally possible. Of course, if true, this cuts off radical empiricism without even a shilling. Radical empiricism takes conjunctive relations at their face value, holding them to be as real as the terms united by them. The world it represents as a collection, some parts of which are conjunctively and others disjunctively related. Two parts, themselves disjoined, may nevertheless hang together by intermediaries with which they are severally connected, and the whole world eventually may hang together similarly, inasmuch as some path of conjunction